There are people in your life right now who can't be trusted. Not because they yell or make scenes, not because they hurt you in obvious ways, but because they're subtle, charming on the outside, helpful on the surface, even warm and empathetic. But behind that mask, there's something dangerous hiding. Quiet manipulation, emotional distortion, a slow unraveling of your confidence that you don't even notice until it's too late. Carl Jung didn't just study behavior, he studied the parts of people they don't show. He warned that the most harmful people in your life won't always be the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who smile the most, who blend in, who seem like they care. But quietly, piece by piece, they dismantle you from the inside. They don't need to scream to control you. They don't need to attack to cause harm. That's exactly what makes them so hard to detect. Jung dedicated his life to understanding this. Not just the persona, the face people show to the world, but the shadow, the part they hide even from themselves. Because here's the truth, people don't show you who they are. They show you what they think you'll accept, what they think will work. And if you're not paying attention, you'll end up giving your time, your energy, even your love to someone who was never safe to begin with. That's why Jung identified 6 patterns, 6 psychological masks people wear. These types feel harmless at first, but if you don't wake up to them, they can quietly ruin your life. Let's dive into the first one. 1. The chronic victim. This is the person who is always suffering, always the one being wronged. They've never made a mistake. It's always someone else's fault. You start off feeling bad for them. You want to help. You care. You step in, offer support, lend a hand. You believe in their pain. But Jung saw what lies beneath this pattern. Chronic victimhood is often a disguise for manipulation. When someone always positions themselves as the victim, they never have to change. They never take responsibility. They never confront their own darkness. Why would they? Their suffering gives them power. They use guilt as a tool. They use their past to justify present toxicity. They drain your energy and make you feel responsible for saving them. But here's the most dangerous part. They don't want to be healed. They want control. Jung warned us, this type has fused with their shadow. They thrive on emotional dependency, on making you feel bad for having boundaries. And if you don't pull away, you'll end up feeling guilty for being okay, for being strong, for having your life together. They don't need healing, they need power, and your compassion gives it to them. 2. The charming mirror. This one is tricky. This is the person who reflects you back to yourself. They seem like the perfect supporter. They laugh at your jokes, they admire your dreams. They validate all your insecurities. At first, it feels incredible, like they really get you. But eventually, you realize something's off. You don't really know who they are. They're not showing you them. They're only showing you you. Jung called this the persona trap. When someone becomes so identified with the mask they wear, the real self disappears. The charming mirror doesn't have substance. They just adapt, they mimic, they impress. And here's the danger. They're not loyal to you. They're loyal to your approval. The second you stop praising them, they either disappear or turn against you. Because the relationship was never built on connection. It was built on performance. You didn't meet a person, you met your own reflection. And trusting someone like that, it's like trying to hold on to smoke. 3. The passive-aggressive enabler. This one flies under the radar. They never directly oppose you. They don't yell. They don't challenge you outright. Instead, they nod, smile, listen, and then they subtly undermine. You'll say, "I'm thinking about starting my own business," and they'll respond, "Wow, that's brave. I just don't want you to be disappointed." It sounds like concern. It feels supportive, but it's not. It's control disguised as care. Jung described this as the hidden shadow of the helper. These people don't empower you. They plant doubt. They present fear as wisdom. They make you second-guess yourself, not through conflict, but through carefully chosen words that feel like love. And here's why it's dangerous. You internalize their doubt as your own. You start thinking they're the voice of reason, that you're the one being reckless. But really, they just don't want to lose control. Because if you outgrow them, if you succeed without them, they lose their grip. Their ego takes a hit. So they hold you back, gently, quietly, and call it love. 4. The secret competitor. This one is harder to spot because they act like they're your friend. They cheer you on, say they're happy for your wins, but something always feels off. Every time something good happens for you, they find a way to redirect the attention. They tell their own story, just slightly better, slightly more impressive. If you write a book, they've been thinking about writing one for years. If you land a big opportunity, they know someone even more successful in the same space. Jung believed this comes from unconscious inferiority. It's not that they hate you, they just resent what you represent. Your success reminds them of what they haven't done. Instead of working on themselves, they compete with you. Silently, secretly, they copy your ideas and claim them as their own. They give you backhanded compliments. And worst of all, they only truly celebrate you when they're ahead. And when you fail, there's relief in their voice. Not loud, but it's there. They'll say, "I had a feeling that might happen. I just didn't want to say anything." That's not support. That's sabotage wearing a smile. These people see you as a threat. And the longer you ignore that, the more damage they'll do while calling it friendship. That's 4 out of 6. 4 patterns that start off feeling safe, even supportive. But beneath the surface, they're quietly draining your energy, your confidence, your clarity. In the next part, we'll expose the final 2, the manipulative wise one and the seductive empath who hides control under the mask of care. We'll also explore what Jung believed caused these patterns to form and why they're often the hardest to spot. Let's keep going. The 4 personality types we've covered so far, the chronic victim, the charming mirror, the passive-aggressive enabler, and the secret competitor, are already dangerous enough. But the last 2, they're even harder to detect. Why? Because they often present themselves as wise, evolved, emotionally intelligent. They look like mentors, they feel like safe spaces, but under the surface they're masters of control. Let's break them down. 5. The spiritual narcissist, the wise one. This is the person who shows up with calm energy, normal deep quotes, a library of self-help terms, and what feels like emotional maturity. They talk about alignment, shadow work, healing, peace, consciousness, and higher self. They seem enlightened, grounded like they've done the work. But here's what Carl Jung would tell you. Real wisdom doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to wear a costume. And this person, they're not truly at peace. They're addicted to being seen as at peace. They dominate not through arguments, but through superiority. You can't call them out. They'll just say you're triggered. You can't disagree. They'll say you're projecting. You can't get upset. They'll tell you it's a reflection of your inner wounds. Sounds like spiritual guidance, right? It's not. It's power play wrapped in vocabulary. They've built an identity around being evolved, but it's not real integration, it's costume. Jung would say this is a split psyche. The conscious mind is clinging to a spiritual persona, but the shadow is still there, quietly manipulating, judging, and controlling. Here's the real red flag. You start feeling smaller around them, more confused, less sure of yourself. But because they sound so calm, so sure, so wise, you second-guess your instincts. You stop arguing, not because you found peace, but because you've been emotionally disarmed. And they never have to take accountability, because you're the one who's not healed. Jung warned us, when someone hides their ego behind spiritual language, they haven't transcended it. They've just rebranded it. They didn't kill the ego, they gave it beads, crystals, and a soft voice. And that ego still needs control. This is why they don't want equals. They want students. They don't want connection. They want followers. And if you question them, you'll find yourself being labeled unconscious or not ready. That's not spirituality. That's just manipulation in meditation clothes. 6, the seductive empath as the emotional controller. Now this one is going to sting because it often starts out as something beautiful. This is the person who feels everything. They pick up on your energy, they understand your silence. They seem tuned in to your every emotional shift. They comfort you, they cry with you, they tell you they feel your pain. And at first, it feels like a gift. You finally found someone who sees you, who cares, who gets it. But slowly you start to notice a pattern. You start tiptoeing around them. You hold back your feelings so you don't upset them. You hesitate to speak your truth because they'll take it personally. They'll spiral. They'll say, "That energy really hurts me," or "I can't be around that kind of negativity." Before you realize it, you're no longer expressing yourself. You're managing them. You're walking on eggshells, not because they're angry, but because they're fragile, because their sensitivity has become the reason you have to stay small. Jung talked a lot about projection, about how we unconsciously assign our unhealed parts onto other people. This empath type, they do exactly that. They take their inner chaos, their unprocessed emotion, and make it your responsibility. And because they cry, because they feel so much, it doesn't look like control. It looks like pain. So you give in, you adapt, you fix, you protect. But this isn't love, it's emotional submission. You're no longer connecting, you're caretaking. And every time you fail to do it perfectly, they break down and you become the bad guy. Suddenly you're cold, you're insensitive, you're toxic, but you're not, you're just exhausted. And they've never learned to hold themselves. So they place that burden on everyone around them. That's not empathy, that's emotional outsourcing. Jung warned about this danger. When someone demands the world organize itself around their wounds, they're not growing, they're manipulating through tears, through sensitivity, through collapse. And if you don't step away, you'll spend months, maybe years, trying to regulate someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own healing. You'll confuse chaos for depth. You'll confuse tears for truth. You'll confuse emotional neediness for connection. But this isn't love. This is trauma bonding. And Jung's advice? Leave. Not with hatred, not with drama. Just walk away. Because this person will never say they're dangerous. They'll say they're just feeling too much. And if you're not deeply rooted in yourself, you'll start to believe them. You'll start thinking you're the one hurting them. But you're not. You just got too close. Now we've seen all 6 masks. The 6 people Jung warned us about. Not because they're evil, but because they're deeply unaware. They've never faced their shadow, so instead they make you live in it. Let's recap. The chronic victim who uses guilt as a weapon. The charming mirror who performs your reflection. The passive-aggressive enabler who plants doubt with a smile. The secret competitor who applauds while secretly resenting you. The spiritual narcissist who uses healing as control. The empathic manipulator who turns their pain into your prison. Each one wears a mask. Each one thrives on your unawareness. And Jung's warning wasn't just to avoid these people. It was to understand why we keep letting them in. Because here's the deeper truth. If you're surrounded by people like this, it's not just about them. It's about you, your unhealed shadow, your need to feel needed, your craving for approval, your fear of setting boundaries. That's what we'll dive into in the next part. How your own shadow attracts these patterns, and how to finally become someone no manipulator can control, guilt, or break. Now that you've seen all 6 masks, the victim, the mirror, the enabler, the competitor, the wise one, and the empathic controller, you might be wondering something deeper. Why do I keep attracting these people? Why do they keep showing up in my life? Jung had a painfully honest answer: because you haven't faced your own shadow. This is where most people stop listening, because it's easier to blame them, the manipulators, the liars, the narcissists. But Jung didn't believe in surface blame. He believed in deep pattern recognition. And he saw a truth that most people never want to admit. You attract what you haven't integrated. Let that sink in. If your life is full of chronic victims, maybe a part of you still believes your worth comes from saving others. If you keep falling for charming mirrors, maybe a part of you is still addicted to approval more than authenticity. If passive-aggressive people keep circling you, maybe you're still afraid to trust your instincts, and you confuse doubt for logic. Jung would tell you, they're not here to punish you, they're here to mirror you. Not because you're just like them, but because some part of you still tolerates what you haven't healed. This video isn't just about who to avoid, it's about why you keep tolerating them in the first place, why their patterns still make sense to you, why part of you still says yes when you should have walked away. The answer? The shadow. The shadow attracts the mask. Jung described the shadow as everything you buried inside yourself, the anger you weren't allowed to express, the selfishness you were taught to feel guilty about, the strength you were told was too much. You buried these parts of yourself to be accepted, to feel safe, to avoid rejection. So you became the opposite, agreeable, kind, emotionally intelligent, forgiving, patient, nurturing, all good things until they turn into blind spots. Because when you bury your fire, you tolerate being burned. When you suppress your intuition, you ignore red flags. When you silence your anger, you accept disrespect. Jung didn't want you to become cold. He wanted you to become whole. And that means reclaiming the parts of you that were labeled too much, too intense, or too selfish by people who benefited from your silence. Because here's the truth. If you keep showing up in love without boundaries, manipulators will always find you. Not because you're broken, but because you're easy to feed from. They see your light, your empathy, your care, and they twist it. And if you don't reclaim your shadow, the part of you that protects, resists, says no, you'll keep confusing love with self-abandonment. So what do? You stop performing for peace. You stop handing out access like it's kindness. You stop proving you're not the problem by sacrificing yourself for people who never change. Because some people aren't growing, they're just adapting their mask. Some people aren't learning, they're repeating. You've seen it, someone who's been the same for 10 years. Same habits, same blame, same emotional stories repackaged in healing language. They talk about growth, but it's performative. They still use guilt, flattery, or collapse to get what they want. They haven't changed, they've just gotten better at hiding the pattern. And if you're the kind of person who values harmony more than honesty, you'll keep bending. You'll keep over-explaining. You'll keep lowering your standards just to avoid conflict. But Jung didn't want you to avoid conflict. He wanted you to have clarity. And that means being able to say, this is not for me. I don't need proof to walk away. My energy is not up for negotiation. So here's what you do next. Step 1, audit your circle. Ask yourself, who drains me consistently? Who do I always feel the need to explain myself to? Who causes me to question my clarity, even when I know I'm right? If someone only treats you well when they're in control of the narrative, if someone always needs more context just to treat you with basic respect, if someone leaves you more confused than connected, you don't need closure. You need distance. Jung said, withdrawal isn't always avoidance, it's consciousness. You walk away not because you hate them, but because you're done abandoning yourself to keep the peace. Step 2, let your shadow speak. That fire inside you that's been silenced, that edge you tucked away to be likable, it's time to bring that part back. Let yourself get angry, not violently, but clearly. Let yourself say no without a paragraph. Let yourself question motives without guilt. Your shadow isn't evil, it's the immune system of your psyche. It protects your energy. It tells the truth. It remembers who you are when you're being emotionally gaslit into forgetting. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If you want real peace, stop chasing surface calm. Integrate the part of you that can leave, that can set standards, that can say, I'm not available for this anymore. Step 3, stop explaining. The people who deserve access to you won't require a PowerPoint presentation just to respect your boundaries. They'll feel them, they'll honor them. But toxic people? They'll demand explanations. They'll twist your boundaries into betrayal. They'll say you're overreacting, that you owe them. Let them. Jung didn't believe in convincing unconscious people to understand you. He believed in becoming so rooted in your own truth that their confusion no longer slows you down. You don't need to be understood to walk away. You just need to be clear. Step 4, trust what you felt the first time. You know that moment, that little nudge in your gut, the instant something felt off with someone? That wasn't paranoia. That was your subconscious doing the math faster than your mind, picking up on tone shifts, patterns, micro-expressions, energy changes. But instead of trusting it, you hoped you were wrong. You gave the benefit of the doubt. You waited for proof. Stop waiting. Toxic people don't show up in your life with a warning label. They show up with charm. They tell emotional stories. They speak in alignment language. They say they feel your energy. But over time, the mask slips. And when it does, you better be far enough away that it no longer costs you anything. Let's bring this home. You've seen the 6 psychological masks Carl Jung warned us about. You've explored how your own unhealed shadow invites these patterns into your life. Now here's the final and most important lesson Jung left behind. You don't need to fear the world. You need to stop fearing your own knowing, because once you become fully rooted in yourself, the game changes. You don't attract manipulators the same way. You don't tolerate emotional confusion. You don't stay in relationships where you're constantly shrinking just to feel safe. You become someone they can't reach. Let's get specific about what that looks like. When you integrate your shadow, you stop trying to prove you're good by sacrificing your boundaries. You stop letting guilt dictate your decisions. You stop mistaking being liked for being loved. You start trusting your inner know as much as you used to trust your need to explain. You stop needing long conversations to justify simple truths like, "This drains me. I'm not available for that. I don't feel safe here." Because the moment your nervous system is no longer addicted to people-pleasing, everything shifts. You become less reactive and more discerning. You become less forgiving of red flags and more forgiving of yourself for walking away without a grand finale. Because some exits don't need closure. They just need clarity. Jung's warning wasn't about avoidance. It was about alignment. These 6 personality types, the victim, the mirror, the enabler, the competitor, the spiritual narcissist, the emotional controller, will always exist. But once you reclaim the parts of yourself you gave up to stay accepted, they no longer find a home inside your life. Because here's what most people never realize. You weren't manipulated because you were weak. You were manipulated because you were open without boundaries. You gave too much benefit of the doubt. You led with empathy before clarity. You assumed good intentions where you should have asked better questions. That ends now. The final shift from self-abandonment to self-alignment. This isn't about becoming cold. This is about becoming clear. You are no longer someone who explains your value. You are no longer someone who tolerates emotional chaos just to keep the peace. You are no longer someone who confuses someone else's pain for your responsibility. You now understand. Compassion without boundaries is self-harm. Empathy without discernment is vulnerability to manipulation. Forgiveness without change is emotional recycling. And most importantly, love without self-trust is not love. It's surrender. So what happens next? You don't just cut people off. You rise into a different frequency. You become someone whose energy repels manipulation. Not because you're on guard, but because you're deeply embodied in truth. You can still be kind, still be warm, still be loving, but you're no longer available for codependence masked as care, guilt disguised as love, flattery hiding a power play, healing that feels like performance. You've seen behind the mask. You've faced your own. You know the pattern. You're done. Here's what you're becoming. You are becoming someone who doesn't flinch when people get uncomfortable with your truth. You are becoming someone who no longer entertains confusion as a relationship dynamic. You are becoming someone who walks away the first time your instincts whisper, "This feels wrong." You are becoming someone who no longer calls chaos depth, who no longer calls collapsing love, who no longer calls emotional turbulence intensity. You are becoming someone who respects your nervous system more than their approval. And from this place, you don't need to defend. You don't need to explain. You don't need to be liked. You just are, whole, rooted, aware, and unreachable to those who live in denial of their own shadow. The closing truth. Jung's real message. Carl Jung didn't tell you all of this to make you afraid of people. He told you this so you'd finally stop fearing your own knowing. Because when you truly know yourself, when you've met your own shadow, you can meet others without losing your sense. You can love without dissolving. You can care without collapsing. You can hold space for others without making it a prison for yourself. And the manipulators, the charmers, the silent competitors, they don't disappear. They just stop seeing you as a target. Because you're no longer feeding what they came to feed on. You're not chasing peace. You are peace. You're not looking for truth. You live it. You're not begging to be understood. You're anchored. So if this hit you hard, good. It means something ancient in you is waking up. It means the old you, the one who made themselves smaller to be safe, is dying. It means the new you, the integrated, rooted, clear version is being born. And now there's no going back. You've seen behind the smile. You've felt the pattern. You've met the mask, and more importantly, you've met yourself. And that's all Jung ever wanted for you, to stop giving your life away piece by piece. And finally, live all of it as yourself. Whole, awake, unshakable. You are now the person Jung wanted you to be. Impossible to fool. Impossible to manipulate. Impossible to break.